placed a hand on Nelson's shoulder, his expression serious. "We are in this together, Nelson. I know it's not easy, but we have to stop her before it's too late." Nelson took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "I just want to know the truth," he said quietly, "and I want to make sure no one else gets hurt because of her." As they left the office, Nelson couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to step into a dangerous game. One that could cost him more than just his pride. But he had to do it. He had to know how deep Josephine's deception went and what she was truly capable of. And as he prepared to face the woman who had shattered his life, Nelson knew that this time he wouldn't be the one caught off guard. This time he would be ready. The night before Nelson was set to meet Josephine, he barely slept. His mind was a storm of emotions: anger, fear, confusion, and a lingering sense of betrayal that refused to fade. But underneath it all, there was a new resolve. He had to go through with this, not just for himself, but for all the people who might be caught in Josephine's web of lies. The next morning, Nelson dressed carefully, choosing a simple, unassuming outfit that wouldn't draw attention. He slipped the small recorder Grayson gave him into his pocket, his fingers brushing against it as if seeking reassurance. This was it. He was about to confront Josephine, to see if he could unravel the truth from the woman who had deceived him so completely. The meeting was set for a quiet park not far from the apartment they had once shared. Nelson arrived early, his heart pounding as he waited on a bench near the fountain where they had once spent peaceful afternoons together. Those memories now felt like a cruel joke, twisted and tainted by everything that had happened since. Finally, Josephine appeared, walking toward him with the same graceful stride that had once captivated him. She looked as beautiful as ever, her long hair flowing in the breeze. But Nelson saw her now with new eyes. She was no longer the woman he had loved, but a stranger, one who had woven a web of lies and deceit that had ensnared them both. "Nelson," Joseph greeted him with a small, hesitant smile. "I didn't think you'd want to see me again." Nelson forced a tight smile, playing the role Grayson had outlined. "I wasn't sure myself," he admitted, his voice low. "But I couldn't just leave things the way they were. We spent years together, Josephine. I need to understand why." Josephine's eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe, or perhaps just the weight of the secret she was keeping. She sat down beside him on the bench, her hands folded in her lap. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Nelson. I swear, that was never my intention." "Then why?" Nelson asked, his voice laced with the pain he no longer had to fake. "Why did you marry me if you didn't love me? Why lie to me for so long?" Josephine sighed, looking down at her hands. "At first, it was for my family," she said quietly. "They were struggling and marrying you seemed like the only way to help them. You were kind, generous. I thought maybe I could grow to love you, but my heart belonged to someone else, even then." Nelson felt a pang of sorrow, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the mission at hand. And after you moved here, why didn't you just leave me and be with Eddie? Why keep lying? Josephine hesitated, her gaze shifting slightly as if she were weighing her words. It's not that simple, she said finally. There were things I needed to take care of. I didn't want to hurt you, Nelson, but I couldn't just walk away without tying up loose ends. Loose ends? Nelson repeated, trying to keep his tone casual. Like what? Josephine looked at him, her eyes sharp now, as if she sensed the shift in his demeanor. Why are you really here, Nelson? Is it just to talk, or is there something else? Nelson's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. I told you, I just want to understand. I want closure. Josephine, I can't move on if I don't know the truth. For a long moment, Josephine studied him, her expression unreadable. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. I was going to tell you everything, she said softly, handing it to him. But I needed to make sure you were ready to hear it. Nelson took the envelope, his fingers trembling slightly as he opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper covered in Josephine's neat handwriting. It was a letter addressed to him, detailing everything she had never told him. The money, the contacts, the deals she had made behind his back, all of it was laid bare in those few lines. I've been involved in some things I'm not proud of, the letter began. But it was all to protect the people I care about. You were never supposed to get hurt, Nelson. I am sorry that you did. As Nelson read, a cold dread settled in his stomach. The letter confirmed much of what Grayson and Eddie had suspected, but it also revealed something even more alarming. Josephine wasn't just a pawn in someone else's game. She was deeply entangled, playing both sides for her own gain. When he finished reading, Nelson looked up at Josephine, his expression one of disbelief. You were using me all this time? It was about the money, wasn't it? Josephine didn't deny it. I did what I had to do, she said, her voice steady. But it's not just about the money, Nelson. There are people involved who are far more dangerous than you realize. I am trying to get out, to leave it all behind, but it's not that easy. They won't just let me walk away. Who are they? Nelson pressed, feeling the weight of the recorder in his pocket, capturing every word. What have you gotten yourself into? Josephine shook her head, a hint of fear creeping into her eyes. You don't want to know, Nelson. Trust me, the less you're involved, the better. Just take the letter and go. Forget about me. About all of this. It's the only way you stay safe. Nelson's mind raced. He could see the cracks in Josephine's resolve, the fear she was trying to hide. She was in deep, maybe too deep to get out of her own. But he couldn't just walk away. Not now. Not when he was so close to the truth. I can't do that, Nelson said, his voice firm. If you're in trouble, then we need to face it together. I am not going to let you deal with this alone, Josephine. For a moment, Josephine looked at him, something like regret flashing in her eyes. Then she stood up, her expression hardening. You don't understand, Nelson. You can't help me. No one can. If you really care about me, if you ever did, you will let this go. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Nelson alone on the bench. The letter still clutched in his hand. He watched her go, a storm of emotions swelling inside him. Anger, sadness, fear, and something else. Determination. He knew now that he couldn't just walk away. Whatsoever Josephine was involved in, however dangerous it might be, he had to see it through. He had to know the truth, not just for himself, but for the people who might be hurt if Josephine's plans continued unchecked. As he stood to leave, Nelson made a silent vow. He would find out who these people were, what they wanted, and why Josephine was so afraid. And he would stop them, whatever it took. But first, he needed to get his new information to Grayson. They were running out of time, and the deeper they dug, the more dangerous it became. But Nelson wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not when his stakes were this high. And so, with the letter safely tucked away, Nelson set off to meet with Grayson and Eddie, ready to take the next step in a journey that was becoming more treacherous with each passing day. As Nelson drove towards Grayson's office, his mind was racing. The pieces were beginning to fit together, but the picture they formed was dark and complex. He couldn't shake the image of Josephine's haunted eyes, the way she had practically begged him to stay out of it. But he couldn't. Not now. When he arrived at Grayson's office, he found both the investigator and Eddie waiting for him. The tension in the room was palpable as Nelson handed Grayson the letter Josephine had given him. Grayson read it quickly, his expression growing grimmer with each line. "This confirms our worst fears," Grayson said, his voice tight. "Josephine is deeply involved with some very dangerous people. The money laundering, the criminal contacts. It all points to a large-scale operation. She's in over her head, and if she tries to back out now, she could be in serious danger." Eddie leaned forward, his face pale. "What do we do? How do we stop this?" Grayson glanced at Nelson, then back at Eddie. "We have two options. We can go to the authorities with what we have and hope it's enough for them to act. But that could take time, and there is no guarantee Joseph will be safe in the meantime. Or," he paused, looking at Nelson, "we can try to confront these people ourselves, cut a deal, or find a way to bring them down from the inside." Nelson's heart pounded. The idea of confronting criminals, of putting himself and possibly Eddie in danger, was terrifying. But the thought of doing nothing, of leaving Josephine to face this alone, was worse. "I am in," Nelson said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Whatever it takes, I am going to help her. She may have lied to me, but no one deserves to face something like this alone." Eddie nodded, his expression determined. "Me too. I am not letting Josephine go down without a fight." Grayson looked between them, a mixture of respect and concern in his eyes. "All right," he said finally, "but we do this smart. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. We get in, gather the evidence we need, and get out. Then we let the authorities take it from there." The plan was set. Over the next few days, Nelson, Eddie and Grayson worked together, gathering information, tracing connections, and planning their next move. It was a race against time, and they all knew it. Every day, the risk grew greater, the danger more palpable. Finally, the day came when they were ready to confront the people behind Josephine's entanglement. With Grayson's connections, they arranged a meeting with one of the key players, posing as potential partners in a new deal. It was a risky move, but they had no other choice. The meeting took place in a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of town. Nelson's heart raced as they entered, every sense on high alert. Grayson had warned them that these were not people to be underestimated. They were ruthless, willing to do whatever it took to protect their operations. As they faced the man in charge, Nelson could see the cold calculation in his eyes. This was someone who was used to getting his way, someone who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate any threat to his empire. The conversation was tense, each word carefully chosen, each movement watched, but Nelson and Eddie played their parts well, feeding the man just enough information to keep him interested, to make him believe they were genuinely considering joining his operation. At the crucial moment, Grayson revealed their true intentions. "We know what you're doing," he said calmly, his voice firm. "We have evidence and we are prepared to take it to the authorities unless you cooperate." The man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Nelson thought everything was about to go horribly wrong. But then the man laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "You think you can threaten me?" he sneered. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Before anyone could react, the man signaled to his guards, and suddenly they were surrounded. Nelson's heart pounded in his chest as he realized just how badly things had gone. This was no longer about gathering evidence, it was about survival. But just as the situation seemed hopeless, a shot rang out. One of the guards fell, and in the chaos that followed, Grayson, Nelson, and Eddie managed to fight their way out. It was a blur of movement, fear, and adrenaline, but somehow they made it out alive. Breathing heavily, they regrouped outside the reality of what had just happened, sinking in. They had been outplayed, and it was a miracle they had escaped with their lives. "Now what?" Eddie asked, his voice shaky. Grayson wiped the sweat from his brow, his expression grim. "We need to go to the authorities now. We've stirred the hornet's nest, and it's only a matter of time before they come after us." With no other options, they handed over everything they had to the authorities, including the recordings Nelson had made and the letter from Josephine. It was enough to launch a full investigation, and soon the entire operation was exposed. Josephine was arrested, along with several other key players in the organization. The trial that followed was long and grueling, but in the end, justice was served. Josephine was sentenced to prison, her life in ruins. But for Nelson, the end brought little satisfaction, only a deep, aching sadness. As he stood outside the courthouse, watching as Josephine was led away in handcuffs, he couldn't help but wonder how things had gone so wrong. He had loved her once, and she had betrayed him in ways he never could have imagined. But even now, he couldn't bring himself to hate her. She had been lost, caught up in something too big for her to control, and in the end, she had paid the price. Eddie stood beside him, silent for a long time before finally speaking. She wasn't all bad, you know. She did what she did because she was scared, desperate, but that doesn't excuse it. Nelson nodded, his throat tight. I know, but it doesn't change what happened. We have to move on now, try to find some kind of peace. As they walked away from the courthouse, Nelson thought about everything that had led them to this point. The lies, the deception, the danger they had faced. It all seemed so surreal now, like a bad dream. But it had been real, and the consequences would stay with them forever. Moral lessons. The dangers of deception. Josephine's story shows how lies and deceit, even when done out of desperation, can spiral out of control and have devastating consequences. Honesty and transparency, even in difficult situations, are crucial to building and maintaining trust in any relationship. 2. The importance of integrity. Nelson's determination to uncover the truth, despite the personal pain it cost him, highlights the importance of integrity, staying true to one's values and seeking justice, even when it's difficult, is essential in navigating life's challenges. 3. The consequences of choices. Every decision Josephine made, from marrying Nelson for financial security to getting involved with dangerous criminals, led her down a path that ultimately destroyed her. This story serves as a reminder that our choices have long-lasting consequences, not just for ourselves, but for those around us. 4. The power of forgiveness. Despite the pain Josephine caused, Nelson chose not to hate her. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing wrongdoing, but it allows us to move forward and find peace within ourselves. 5. The complexity of human nature. People are often a mix of good and bad, driven by fear, love, desperation, or ambition. Understanding this complexity can help us approach situations with empathy, even when we are hurt by others' actions. We have come to the end of the story. If you love this video, please kindly share with your loved ones, leave us a comment on your opinion, and subscribe for another interesting video like this. Until I see you all on the next one. Bye for now.